Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Imagine being a professional land surveyor who knows every inch of your property, only to wake up and find your HOA has literally bolted a massive speed bump onto your private driveway overnight. They thought they could flex their power on me, but they had no idea I had the legal receipts to ruin them. You won't believe the trap they walked into. I work as a land surveyor, which means I spend my days measuring property lines, creating legal descriptions, and helping people figure out exactly where their land starts and ends. It's not the most exciting job in the world, but it pays well, and I'm good at it. More importantly, it means I know exactly what I own and where my property boundaries are. This detail is going to be important later. I bought my house about 5 years ago. It's a corner lot in a cul-de-sac, which was a big selling point for me. More yard space, less traffic, and a bit more privacy than the houses crammed together in the middle of the street. The house itself was one of the first ones built in the development way back before the current HOA was even a thing. We're talking decades ago, when the builder was just starting to carve out lots and the whole area was basically farmland. Because my house is so old compared to the rest of the neighborhood, the lot lines are a bit unusual. When I bought the place, I did what any good surveyor would do and commissioned a full property survey. I wanted to know exactly what I was buying. That survey showed something interesting. The last 15 feet of my paved driveway, including the apron where it meets the main road through the neighborhood, is actually part of my private property. Most people would assume that's common ground or public right-of-way, but it's not. It's mine. The survey was crystal clear about it, all officially stamped and recorded with the county. Now about the HOA. Like most HOAs, ours is run by a board of residents who volunteer their time. I say volunteer, but really, it's more like they crave the tiny bit of power it gives them. The current president is a woman in her mid-60s, a retiree who seems to have nothing better to do than worry about what everyone else is doing. Let's just say she and I have history. A few months back, I noticed her adult kids were visiting for a week. Nice enough people, but they kept parking their cars on the grass next to the street. This is a clear violation of our HOA bylaws. Everyone knows you're not supposed to park on the grass because it tears it up and looks terrible. I'm not usually one to make a fuss, but I'd just gotten dinged by the HOA myself for leaving my trash bins out 6 hours too long after pickup day. So I figured if I'm getting hassled for minor stuff, everyone should be held to the same standard. I sent a polite email to the HOA board with photos showing the vehicles on the grass. I didn't make a big deal out of it, just said I wanted to report a bylaws violation like any good neighbor should. The board had to send an official warning notice. The thing is, they send these notices to the homeowner of the property, which in this case was the president herself. She basically had to write herself up for her own kids breaking the rules. She was not happy about that. I could tell from the icy tone of her response email that she took it personally. But what was she going to do? The rules are the rules, and everyone saw the email thread. She couldn't exactly ignore a documented violation without looking like she was playing favorites. Ever since then, she's had it out for me. Nothing too obvious, but little things. My request to the board suddenly took longer to get responses. When I asked about getting a copy of the HOA's insurance policy, which homeowners have a right to see, it took 3 follow-up emails before I got it. Petty stuff, but I noticed. Then she started her big crusade about speeding in the neighborhood. She sent out an email to all residents claiming that cars were racing through the cul-de-sac, and it was only a matter of time before someone got hurt. She made it sound like we were living in the middle of a drag racing strip. In reality, it's a quiet suburban street where most people drive slowly because their own kids are playing outside. But she convinced a few other board members that this was a serious safety issue. They started talking about traffic calming measures. Speed limit signs went up even though the county already has posted limits. Then she floated the idea of speed bumps. That's where things get interesting. It was a Tuesday morning around 6:30. I was heading to a job site about an hour away, so I was up earlier than usual. I backed out of my garage and started down my driveway like I'd done 1,000 times before. Then, about 3/4 of the way down, I heard this horrible scraping sound from underneath my car. It was loud, metallic, and definitely not normal. I slammed on the brakes immediately. My first thought was that I'd run over something, maybe a piece of debris that had fallen into my driveway overnight. I put the car in park and got out to look. That's when I saw it. There was a brand new speed bump installed right across my driveway apron. Not a smooth, professionally done asphalt bump that's integrated into the road surface. This was one of those cheap rubber and plastic jobs, bright yellow and black, the kind you can order online and bolt down yourself. And someone had bolted it right into my pavement. I just stood there for a minute staring at it. I wasn't angry yet, I was more confused than anything. Why would someone put a speed bump in a driveway? That doesn't even make sense from a traffic control perspective. You put speed bumps in roads, not in the private driveways that connect to those roads. Then it clicked. The HOA must have done this. And they probably thought they were putting it in the road, on common property. They had no idea this section was actually mine. Instead of losing my temper, I did what I do best. I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. I took photos of the speed bump from every angle. I took close-ups of the bolts drilled into my pavement. I took pictures of the fresh scrape marks on the underside of my car where it had hit the bump. I even used a measuring app to record the exact position of the bump relative to my garage door and the property stakes I knew were buried at the corners of my lot. I spent about 20 minutes out there being methodical. If this was going to turn into a thing, I wanted evidence. Lots of it. After I documented everything, I went back inside. I wasn't going to work anymore, not with my car potentially damaged. I called my job site and told them I'd be late, then sat down at my computer. I pulled up the HOA board email list and composed a very calm, very professional message. I wrote that I'd discovered a new speed bump installed at the end of my driveway that morning. I asked if they could please provide me with the board meeting minutes where this installation was approved, the vendor information for whoever did the work, and the municipal permit that would have been required for this kind of modification to the street. I knew they didn't have any of that. This had all the hallmarks of a rush job, probably done over the weekend by the cheapest handyman the president could find. But I wanted to give them a chance to realize their mistake before I escalated. I sent the email at 7:15 in the morning. By 8:30 I had a response. It was from the president and she'd replied to the entire board so everyone could see. Her email said that the board had been discussing traffic calming measures for months, which was true. She said the speed bump was an approved safety installation for the benefit of the entire community. Then she added that if I was having trouble navigating it, perhaps I should drive with more care. She ended by saying the matter was closed and no further discussion was needed. I read that email 3 times. Each time, I noticed something new to irritate me. The condescending tone. The suggestion that I was somehow at fault for hitting an obstacle that had appeared overnight in my own driveway. The complete dismissal of my request for documentation. And most importantly, the fact that she'd completely ignored the actual question. But I smiled. Because this was exactly the response I'd been expecting. She'd just made this way easier for me. I didn't reply to her email. Instead, I went to my home office and opened my filing cabinet. I keep all my important documents organized because that's just how my brain works. I pulled out the folder labeled Property Survey and found the official stamped survey from when I bought the house. The survey was beautiful. Clear, precise, professional. It showed my entire lot with exact measurements. I got out a yellow highlighter and traced the property line that ran along the road. Then I highlighted the notation that specifically called out the driveway apron as being within the property boundary. Just to be absolutely sure, I also logged into the county's public records website and downloaded the official plat map for our subdivision. It confirmed everything my survey showed. I had them dead to rights. I wrote a second email. This time, the subject line was unauthorized structure and property damage. I attached both my highlighted survey and the county plat map as PDF files. In the email, I laid out the facts. I explained that according to the official property survey commissioned at the time of purchase, and confirmed by county records, the structure they'd installed was located entirely on my private property. I noted that they had not asked my permission to enter my property or permanently alter it. I mentioned that the structure had already caused damage to my vehicle. Then I gave them 48 hours to have it professionally removed and my property restored to its original condition. I made sure to use phrases like official survey and county records and private property. I wanted this to sound exactly like what it was, the opening move in a legal dispute. I sent that email at 9 in the morning on Tuesday. Then I waited. For about 6 hours I heard nothing. I figured the board was scrambling, maybe calling their HOA management company or trying to figure out what to do. Then at 3 in the afternoon I got a forwarded email from my next door neighbor. My neighbor is a nice guy in his 40s who works from home. We're friendly, wave to each other, sometimes chat when we're both getting the mail. He doesn't like the HOA president much either. She once tried to fine him for having what she called an unapproved garden gnome in his front yard. The email he forwarded was one the president had sent to every single homeowner in the HOA, except me. In it, she painted me as a selfish troublemaker who was trying to block a community safety initiative. She said I was refusing to cooperate with a simple measure designed to protect children. She made it sound like I was personally responsible for any future accidents that might happen because I wouldn't allow the speed bump to stay. My neighbor added a short note at the top saying he thought I should see what she was telling people. I sat back in my chair and actually laughed. She was trying to turn the neighborhood against me. She was trying to create social pressure to make me back down. What she didn't understand was that I didn't care what the neighbors thought. I cared about property rights and the law. The 48-hour deadline came and went. Wednesday passed, Thursday morning arrived. The speed bump was still there, still bolted to my driveway, still scraping the undercarriage of my car every time I left the house. Fine, time to handle this myself. I called a local contractor, a guy whose company I'd worked with on survey jobs before. I explained the situation, told him that someone had installed an unauthorized structure on my property and I needed it removed professionally. He thought it was hilarious. He said he could send a crew out that afternoon. They showed up at 2. It took them less than an hour. They unbolted the speed bump, patched the holes in the pavement where the bolts had been, and hauled the whole thing away. The crew chief gave me an itemized invoice for $450. I paid it immediately and asked for a receipt that clearly described the work as removal of unauthorized structure from private property. Next, I took my car to a body shop I trust. I showed them the scrapes on the undercarriage and asked for a written estimate for repairs. The estimate came back at $820. They'd need to sand down the damaged areas, check for any mechanical issues, and repaint the affected sections. Now I had everything I needed. I drafted a formal demand letter. I'd written enough of these in my professional life to know exactly how they should look. I started with a clear timeline of events, date by date. I attached copies of both emails I'd sent to the board. I included a copy of the president's mass email to the neighborhood because that showed malicious intent and an attempt to harass me. I attached my highlighted property survey and the county plat map. I included the paid invoice from the contractor. I included the repair estimate from the body shop. Then came the actual demand. I wanted reimbursement for the full amount, $450 for the removal, $820 for the car repairs. Total of $1,270. I gave them 15 business days to pay. The last paragraph was my favorite part. I wrote that if payment was not received by the deadline, I would file a lawsuit in small claims court to recover these costs, along with court fees and any other applicable damages, without any further notice. I printed 2 copies of this letter with all the attachments. I took both copies to the post office and sent them via certified mail with return receipt requested. One went to the HOA's official mailing address. The other went directly to the president's home address. I wanted to make absolutely sure she couldn't claim she never got it. Then I waited again. The certified mail receipts came back signed after 3 days. Someone at the HOA management company had signed for one. The president herself had signed for the other. A week went by. Nothing. Then, on day 9, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from someone at the HOA management company. She said she was calling about my demand letter and asked if I could call her back to discuss the matter. I didn't call back. There was nothing to discuss. I'd made my position clear. They could pay what they owed or I'd see them in court. On day 12, a check arrived in the mail. It was from the HOA management company drawn on the HOA's account. The amount was exactly $1,270. There was no letter with it, no apology, just the check. I deposited it the same day, but I wasn't done yet. The next HOA monthly meeting was scheduled for the following week. These meetings are technically open to all homeowners, though usually only the board members and maybe 2 or 3 other people show up. Most folks can't be bothered. I decided to attend. I walked in at 7 on the dot, right when the meeting was supposed to start. The president was already sitting at the front table with 2 other board members. When she saw me walk in and take a seat in the front row, her face went pale. I didn't say anything. I just sat down, pulled out my phone, and waited for the meeting to start. About 15 other homeowners showed up, way more than usual. Word had gotten around about what happened, and people wanted to see what would happen next. The president tried to start the meeting like normal. She went through the standard agenda items. Approval of last month's minutes, treasurer's report. I sat quietly and listened. Then came new business. That's when things got interesting. A guy from 2 streets over raised his hand. He asked why the HOA had just paid out over $1,000 for what he'd heard was an illegal installation on someone's private property. He wanted to know who had authorized the work in the first place. The president stammered something about a misunderstanding regarding property lines. She tried to move on, but other people started chiming in. Someone asked why the board hadn't consulted a survey before doing any work. Someone else pointed out that the bylaws require board votes for any expenditure over $500. Had there been a vote to install the speed bump? Had there been a vote to pay the settlement? The president tried to defend herself. She said it had been an honest mistake. She said she'd been trying to improve safety for everyone. But her voice was shaking, and she couldn't make eye contact with anyone. Then my next-door neighbor, the one who'd forwarded me that email, stood up. He said that some board members seemed to think the rules didn't apply to them. He said the neighborhood deserved leadership that actually followed the procedures laid out in the bylaws. He said he'd lost confidence in the current president's ability to lead. Other people nodded. A few said they agreed. Someone made a formal motion of no confidence in the president. Someone else seconded it. The president tried to argue that this wasn't proper procedure, but the treasurer pointed out that the bylaws absolutely allowed for no confidence votes. They took a show of hands. Out of 18 homeowners present, 16 voted in favor. Only the president and one of her friends on the board voted against. The motion passed. The president sat there in silence for a long moment. Then she gathered up her papers, stood up, and walked out of the meeting without another word. The vice president took over and finished the meeting. It lasted another 20 minutes. Before we adjourned, someone suggested that going forward, the board should consult with professionals before making any decisions about property modifications. Everyone agreed that was a good idea. I drove home that night feeling pretty satisfied. My driveway was back to normal. My car was getting fixed. I had my money back. And the person who'd caused all this mess was out of power. A few weeks later, the HOA elected a new president. He's a retired engineer, mid-50s, seems like a reasonable guy. He actually knows how to read site plans and understands the concept of property boundaries. The first time I saw him after the election, he was out walking his dog past my house. He gave me a friendly wave and said he hoped we could all move forward in a more professional way. I waved back and said that sounded good to me. Things have been quiet since then. The new board is actually competent. They follow procedures. They don't make decisions without doing their homework first. And most importantly, they stay off my property. But that wasn't quite the end of the story. About a month after all this went down, something else happened that made the whole situation even more satisfying. I was out front one Saturday morning doing some yard work, just trimming the hedges, nothing major. The new HOA president was walking by with his dog, and he stopped to chat. We'd exchanged pleasantries a few times since he took over, but this was the first real conversation we'd had. He asked me how things were going. I said fine. Then he mentioned something interesting. He said that when the new board had taken over and started going through the HOA's files, they'd discovered some pretty concerning things about how the previous president had been running things. I put down my hedge trimmers and gave him my full attention. He explained that the former president had apparently been making a lot of decisions without proper board approval. The speed bump incident wasn't an isolated thing. She'd been authorizing expenditures, sending violation notices, and making policy changes without following the bylaws that required board votes. The new board had found emails where she'd instructed the HOA management company to do things, then told them to backdate the board meeting minutes to make it look like everything had been properly approved. She'd been basically running the HOA like her personal fiefdom. I asked if the board was planning to do anything about it. He said they were still deciding. The problem was that going after her legally would cost the HOA money, and a lot of homeowners just wanted to move on. But they were documenting everything in case she ever tried to run for the board again. Then he said something that really caught my attention. He told me that I wasn't the only person she'd targeted. There were at least 3 other homeowners who'd had similar run-ins with her. One guy had gotten fined for having his garage door open too long during the day. Another woman had been threatened with a lien on her house for supposedly violating landscaping rules even though her yard looked fine. A couple had been harassed about their choice of front door color even though it was within the approved palette. In each case, the former president had some personal grudge. The guy with the garage door had once complained about her dog barking at night. The woman with the landscaping issue had voted against one of the president's proposals at a meeting. The couple with the door had declined to donate to a charity the president was involved with. It was a pattern. She'd been using her position to settle scores. The new president said he was thinking about reaching out to these other homeowners to let them know they might have grounds to challenge the fines or violations they'd received. He asked if I'd be willing to share my experience with them, just so they'd know it was possible to push back. I said sure. I figured if other people had been dealing with the same kind of harassment I had, they deserved to know their rights. Over the next few weeks, I ended up having conversations with all three of those homeowners. The guy with the garage door fine was particularly angry. He'd paid a $300 fine rather than fight it because he didn't think he had a choice. When I explained what I'd done and showed him copies of my documentation, he decided to file his own demand letter asking for his money back. The woman who'd been threatened with the lien was just relieved to know she wasn't crazy. She'd been told her yard violated HOA standards, but when she asked which specific rule she was breaking, she never got a straight answer. The new board reviewed her case and cleared her of any violations within a week. The couple with the door color issue had actually repainted their door to avoid conflict, even though they'd liked the original color better. They were upset to learn it had all been based on a personal vendetta rather than actual rules. All of this started creating more problems for the former president. People in the neighborhood started talking. The story spread about how she'd been abusing her position. Some folks who'd supported her before started to realize they'd been manipulated. Then things took an interesting turn. The guy who'd paid the $300 fine for his garage door sent his demand letter. The HOA's attorney advised them to pay it because the fine had been improperly issued without a proper board vote. So the HOA cut him a check. But here's where it gets good. When that payment became public record in the HOA meeting minutes, other people started wondering if they'd been improperly fined too. A few more homeowners came forward with stories of questionable violations and fines from the previous administration. The new board decided they needed to do a complete audit. They hired a lawyer who specialized in HOA law to review every fine, every violation notice, and every disciplinary action from the past 3 years. The goal was to figure out which ones were legitimate and which ones were bogus. The audit took about 6 weeks. When the results came back, they were pretty damning. Out of 42 violation notices issued during the former president's tenure, 18 were found to be improperly issued. Either they didn't follow proper procedure, or they were for violations that didn't actually exist in the bylaws, or they were issued without required board votes. The HOA ended up refunding over $4,000 in improper fines. And every single one of those improper fines had been issued to people who'd crossed the former president in some way. At this point, some of the homeowners who'd been wrongly fined started talking about taking legal action against the former president personally, not the HOA, but her specifically. They argued that she'd knowingly abused her position and cost them money. I stayed out of that discussion. I'd gotten my money back and made my point. I didn't need revenge beyond what had already happened. But I understood why they were angry. The former president, for her part, had gone completely silent. She stopped coming to HOA meetings. She stopped participating in neighborhood events. When you saw her outside, she'd hurry back into her house if she noticed anyone looking at her. It was like she'd become a ghost in her own neighborhood. Then, about 2 months after the audit results came out, I saw a for sale sign go up in her yard. I wasn't surprised. Living in a neighborhood where everyone knows you abused your power and got caught must be pretty uncomfortable, especially when people are still finding out new ways you'd messed with them. The house sold within 3 weeks. Apparently she took a lower offer just to get out faster. By the time spring rolled around, she was gone. New owners moved in, a young couple with a baby. They seemed nice. They had no idea about the drama their house had been at the center of. The new HOA president turned out to be exactly what the neighborhood needed. He actually read the bylaws before making decisions. He consulted with homeowners before implementing new policies. He made sure every board vote was properly documented and every expenditure was approved through the right channels. Under his leadership, the HOA started functioning the way it was supposed to, like a professional organization managing common property and enforcing reasonable rules, not like a personal revenge machine for someone with too much time on their hands. I have to admit, watching all of this unfold was incredibly satisfying. Not just because I'd won my own battle, but because it exposed a bigger problem and actually led to positive change. The neighborhood was better off, the HOA was better run, and the people who'd been wronged got some measure of justice. There's a lesson in all of this that goes beyond just my personal experience with the speed bump. When someone in a position of authority starts abusing that authority, they rarely do it just once. There's usually a pattern, and if you're willing to stand up and document what happened to you, you might be opening the door for other people to come forward too. The thing is, most people don't push back when they're treated unfairly by an HOA or any other organization with power over them. They don't think they can win. They don't want the hassle. They just pay the fine or accept the violation notice or comply with the unreasonable demand because it seems easier than fighting. And that's exactly what people like the former president count on. They count on you backing down. They count on you not knowing your rights. They count on you being too intimidated or too busy to challenge them. But when someone does fight back, and especially when that person has the documentation and knowledge to prove they're right, the whole house of cards can collapse pretty quickly. I'm not saying everyone should turn every minor dispute into a legal battle. That's not productive either. But there's a big difference between picking your battles wisely and just rolling over every time someone tries to push you around. In my case, I knew I was right. I had proof. I had the skills and knowledge to handle the situation properly. And I had a high enough threshold for bureaucratic nonsense that I was willing to see it through. The result was not just getting my money back and fixing my car, it was exposing a corrupt HOA president, getting her removed from power, helping other homeowners get justice, and ultimately making my neighborhood a better place to live. Would I do it all again? Absolutely. In fact, I'd do it faster. If I could go back, I probably would have skipped the polite first email and gone straight to the demand letter. But hindsight is 20/20. The important thing is that I stood up for my property rights. I didn't let someone else's ego and authority trip override what was legally and factually correct. And in the end, the system worked the way it was supposed to. These days, when I pull out of my driveway, there's nothing but smooth pavement from my garage all the way to the street. No scraping, no bumps, no unauthorized structures on my property. Just the way it should be. The neighborhood has genuinely improved since the whole incident. The new board runs things professionally. They send out meeting agendas ahead of time. They post minutes online where everyone can see them. They get proper quotes before approving any work. They actually follow the bylaws instead of making up rules as they go along. More importantly, they treat homeowners like adults instead of subjects. If you have a question, you get a straight answer. If you have a concern, they actually listen. If there's a dispute, they look at the facts instead of letting personal feelings drive their decisions. It's amazing how much difference competent leadership makes. I still see some of the people who were wrongly fined during the old regime. The guy with the garage door situation became friendly with me after we both fought back and won. We grab coffee sometimes and talk about home improvement projects. He's actually pretty knowledgeable about electrical work, which has come in handy. The woman who was harassed about her landscaping ended up joining the HOA board herself. She wanted to make sure what happened to her never happened to anyone else. She's been great in that role, very detail-oriented and fair. As for the former president, I heard through the neighborhood gossip network that she moved to a community without an HOA. Apparently, she told people she was tired of dealing with difficult neighbors. The irony of that statement is not lost on anyone who knows the real story. Her house sold to that young couple I mentioned. They're good people. They keep to themselves mostly, but they're friendly when you run into them. Their kid is learning to walk now. Sometimes I see them in the front yard, the dad holding the kid's hands while the kid takes wobbly steps on the grass. It's a reminder of what neighborhoods are supposed to be about. People living their lives, raising their families, taking care of their properties. Not petty power struggles and personal vendettas. I learned a lot from this whole experience, even though I already knew most of it going in. The biggest lesson is probably about documentation. If I hadn't taken all those photos that first morning, if I hadn't kept copies of every email, if I hadn't had my property survey filed away properly, this could have gone very differently. Maybe I would have given in and just dealt with the speed bump. Maybe I would have paid to fix my car myself and never gotten reimbursed. Maybe the former president would still be in charge, still abusing her position, still making life difficult for anyone who crossed her. But because I documented everything and knew my rights, none of that happened. The other lesson is about standing up for yourself when you know you're right. I'm not naturally a confrontational person. I don't enjoy conflict. In my job, I spend most of my time trying to help people resolve boundary disputes peacefully. I believe in compromise and finding solutions that work for everyone. But sometimes compromise isn't possible. Sometimes the other side is just wrong, and they refuse to admit it. In those cases, you have to be willing to fight. Not with anger or emotion, but with facts and legal rights and proper procedures. That's what I did, and it worked. I also learned something about communities. When one person stands up to a bully, it gives other people courage to do the same. I didn't set out to start some kind of movement against the HOA president. I just wanted my driveway fixed and my car repaired. But by fighting back publicly and winning, I showed other people that it was possible. That's how the whole thing with the audit happened. That's how other homeowners got their money back. That's how the neighborhood ended up with better leadership. One person standing up can create a ripple effect that changes things for everyone. Would I recommend that everyone pick fights with their HOA? No. Most of the time, it's better to work things out cooperatively. Most HOA boards are trying to do the right thing, even if they don't always succeed. Most disputes can be resolved with conversation and compromise. But when you're clearly in the right, and when the other side is clearly abusing their power, and when you have the evidence to prove it, don't be afraid to push back. Don't let someone steamroll you just because they have a title or a position of authority. Property rights matter. Due process matters. Following the rules matters. And when someone in charge starts ignoring all of that, they need to be held accountable. I'm still working as a surveyor. Still doing property line surveys, boundary disputes, subdivision plats, all the technical work that comes with the job. And every single time I do a survey for someone buying a house, I tell them the same thing I always have. Keep this survey, file it somewhere safe, know exactly what you own, because someday you might need to prove it. Most people nod politely and probably forget about it as soon as they move in, but maybe one or two of them actually listen. Maybe one or two of them will be prepared if they ever face a situation like I did. That would make all of this worthwhile. The speed bump incident happened over a year ago now. The story has become part of neighborhood lore. New residents sometimes hear about it and ask me what really happened. I give them the short version. HOA put a speed bump on my property without asking. I made them remove it and pay for damages. The president resigned. Simple as that. I don't make a big deal out of it. I don't brag about winning. I just state the facts and move on. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about protecting what's mine and making sure the rules apply equally to everyone. It was about not letting someone abuse their power just because they didn't like me. And on that front, I succeeded completely. My driveway is mine, my property is intact, my car is fixed. The neighborhood is run by competent people who follow proper procedures. And I can drive in and out of my house every single day without worrying about scraping my undercarriage on someone else's bad decision. That's all I ever wanted, and that's exactly what I got. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This was last year. In hindsight, I feel a little bad for the professor. He wasn't the worst I'd ever had, and he was up against a university which was in turmoil behind the scenes and spearheading an untested new course. That being said, I am paying quite exorbitantly for this education, and he was a right snot about this, It was a history course, and one of the assignments was a group project wherein we presented in front of the class. There was a 3-hour seminar taking place in a lecture hall, the last hour of which was reserved for 2 groups to go up and present at a half-hour apiece. This would involve a Q&A session afterwards, just to keep us on our toes, I suppose. Professor really emphasized that we pick the week and topic we're going to present in, and that's that. It's first come, first serve, and if you miss your spot, you get a 0. Thought nothing of it at the time, seemed fair, didn't like his attitude, but whatever, right? Well, I won the lottery with the group I was assigned. They were grand lads and a dream to work with. We decided on an advantageous week to present, given our schedules, and we spent the run-up fine-tuning this presentation and really getting it to work. We used a stopwatch and everything. We even brought in outsiders to ask questions we might not predict. All was well. Except we were presenting in week 5, and a disturbing pattern had emerged during the seminars in weeks 2, 3, and 4. For all his talk about keeping things constrained and everyone working within a schedule, whoever went second was screwed. The first group always ran long, and the second group had to make do with, at most, 20 minutes. You could see the stress on their faces. So come week 5, the rest of my group, a little bit more nervous than I am, worries aloud about whether all of our careful planning will be for pot. I decide to throw a Hail Mary thinking that the worst I could get is a no, right? So I go up right before class starts and ask the prof what are the odds we might go on first out of the 2. After all, we're sure we have this down to 30 minutes. The dude proceeds to rake me across the coals in front of everyone. It was a normal speaking voice, but the podium was right by the door and people were filing in. tells me not to ask such a stupid question and to go back to my seat. I go back, tail between my legs, pissed off, and sit with steam shooting out of my ears for the next 2 hours. Sure enough, the other group goes first, and sure enough, they run long. We shoot concerned looks to the professor, who is too busy watching the other group to notice. Come 50 minutes in and the first group is just about wrapping up. The guys in my group are silently freaking out about this. Nightmare, right? That's when the prof stands up, polite applause all around, and then says, "Well, I guess we're finishing early today, huh?" Like a scene out of a courtroom drama, the four of us stand up like a shot and ask what the hell is going on. He can't quite hear us from back, and we're all talking at once, so he asks, "What's going on?" I charge down those steps like King Kong. In the same tone of voice, in front of the same door that people were now filing out of, I tell this guy that we're booked for the assignment today, and we have something prepared. What? Turns out he totally plumb forgot that we were presenting today, and that's why he was so mad at my suggestion earlier. So I tell him we're presenting now, to an empty room, or he's giving us 100. The poor guy sure did try, insisted we hadn't signed up this week, we had, insisted that he could schedule us in next week, even assuming 2 of 4 of our group weren't away on placement for their teaching degree we booked for this week as ordered. Insisted that he had somewhere to be. Not my problem, mate. Dude just had to wear it. After making a phone call to presumably his next appointment, he had to stand there white as a sheet and wear it. I'll never forget the look on his face. So we presented to a lecture hall, empty of all but the professor and 2 students who, I guess, wanted to see more of the show. We got a great grade to boot. The next one is an entitled parent story. So I need to preface this by saying my boyfriend Jake and I have been together for almost 3 years. We live together, we have a dog together, we are very much functioning adults. Jake is 31, I am 28. We met at work, different departments, no conflict of interest. We've been living together in my apartment for about a year and a half. His mom, I'll call her Roberta, has always been a lot. Very involved, very opinionated, the kind of person who will CC herself into conversations that have nothing to do with her. Jake is her only child, and I think she genuinely believes that means she has permanent veto power over his life decisions. I've been polite, I've had dinners with her, I remembered her birthday, I asked about her garden. I thought we had a kind of strained but workable dynamic. Then last month my manager pulled me aside and told me that a woman had called the main office line asking to speak to someone about my professional conduct and personal reputation. She said she was a family member of someone I was in a relationship with and wanted to make sure I was a person of good character. My manager, to her credit, told the woman this was not something she would discuss and ended the call. But she told me because she thought I deserved to know. I was so stunned I just kind of nodded and went back to my desk. I called Jake that evening and told him what happened. He went very quiet. He said he would talk to her. He did talk to her. Roberta's defense was that she just wanted to make sure I was serious about her son and that she didn't say anything bad. She genuinely could not understand why either of us were upset. She thought this was a normal and reasonable thing to do. Like calling someone's place of employment to ask about their dating suitability is just a thing people do apparently. Jake apologized on her behalf and told her she needed to apologize to me directly. She sent me a text that said, "I hope you understand I was coming from a place of love for my son." That was the apology. I haven't responded and I'm honestly not sure I'm going to. Anyway, thank you for watching.